Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Luisa Coutrinho. I'll be your host today. We'll just wait a few more minutes before we start so more people can join us. Okay, so I'll talk to you briefly. Hello, everyone. We'll just wait one more minute before we start so more people can join us. Oh, sorry. I think now you can listen to me. So let's start, guys. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are. And please, all of you, be very welcome to our first webinar of 2025, where we'll be covering VCM market updates from 2024. And we'll also cover a very hot topic now, that is the updates about the Brazilian emissions trading system. We are also very happy to welcome today a special guest, which is Joe Gold from BeZero, that will share with us some very special insights about the market updates and also the Brazilian ETS. Before we start, I'd just like to go through some housekeeping rules with you. So this webinar is an initiative from Ambipar. It's exclusive to clients and partners. So if you're here, you are our very special guest. And please, if you want to share any of the information or the content that is covered today, contact us before you do so. Also, this webinar is live and we want to hear from you if you have any questions, if you have any comments. So please feel free to use the Q&A function on the Teams tool. Feel free to type either in English or in Portuguese, that will get to your questions by the end of the session. We also welcome any feedback that you might have about the structure and the content of the webinar, so we can use it to improve the next editions. This is a webinar that we do a few times along the year. So let us know if you have any thoughts or if you have any suggestions for our next sessions. I'd also like to give you a brief introduction about Ambipar. If you're here, you probably know about Biophilica and the work that we do in the voluntary carbon market. So I'll just be very, very brief here. Maybe you don't know that now we are part of Ambipar Group, which is a Brazilian company that is focused on environmental solutions. We have been part of the group since 2021. So Ambipar is a Brazilian company that was founded in Brazil and has global acting, and it's a leader in environmental solutions. So we have many different business areas. We don't act only on carbon markets, but also offer other solutions that are focused on circular economy, energy transition, and also environmental generation. So we'd like to say that we are a one-stop shop for environmental solutions. We have more than 600 bases that are spreading in around 40 countries and have more than 20,000 employees so far. Here on the screen, you can see some of our numbers and our impacts as well. We are very proud of the work that we do, and especially in the voluntary carbon market, we have been recognized, internationally recognized for so. So we have been elected as the best forest carbon project developer in the world 4 times by the Environmental Finance, which is a magazine that is focused on environmental assets. And we have also earned the Best Carbon Project Award in the world with our ARR project, Corridors for Life. So just before we get into content, I'd like to introduce the speakers today. Beginning with me, I'm Luisa Cotrim. I'm a business development and strategy specialist at Ambipar. I have been here for around 6 years, and I'll be your host and also cover the voluntary carbon markets updates for 2024. We also have Gabriel Trivellino, which is our senior advocacy analyst, that will cover all the updates about the emissions trading system in Brazil. And we'd like to welcome Joe Gould, which is our special guest. He's a senior manager that's focused on markets and policy at BeZero. And BeZero is a carbon ratings agency that works to provide transparency and scale quality in the voluntary carbon markets. So briefly, we'll also hear from Joe, all his insights, and we can also get to know better about BeZero's work. Okay, so without further ado, this is our agenda for today. As I mentioned, we start with a market overview for 2024. Then we'll hear some thoughts from Joe. We'll get to the Brazilian ETS. Also go through a round of questions with Joe again. And then by the end of the session, we'll hold a Q&A. So as I mentioned, feel free to send your questions that we'll get to them by the end of the webinar. And if we don't have time to answer all of them, we can also get back to you by email later. Okay, so now I'll give you a very brief market overview. We'll look at quarters, but we'll mainly focus on 2024 full year developments. So first we'll see some data on emissions and retirements of credits, so we can see how the supply and the demand of the market has developed during last year. Here we start with carbon credits issuances, that it's a proxy that we use for the supply in the voluntary carbon market. And in this graph, you can see the quarterly data from 2022 to 2024, and it's spread by project category. All this data is from MSCI public report on the voluntary carbon market. So on a quarterly basis, we can see that during last year, the emissions, the credits emissions that have been around 70 to 80 millions during the whole year. But if you look at for the whole year in 2024, 307 million credits have been issued. This amount, it represents around a 10% decrease if we compare to 2023. And if we look before 2023, there has been a decrease also in from 2021 to 2022 and from 2022 to 2023. So the issues, they have been decreasing since 2021. And a part of it, we believe that is because one of the main carbon standards, they have been taking more time to verify carbon credits. So it has represented a big part of this decreasing issuances. We can see by the graph, but we have some data here that Vera has decreased its share to around 30% of the issuances last year, and it has been one of the main reasons for this issuances decrease. But if you look on the other hand, other carbon standards, they have increased their share on the issuances of credits, like ACR and CAR. One of the main projects category that have been responsible for this decrease has been Red Plus, that has decreased 57% in the issuances if we compare to 2023. And it has been due especially to the delays by Vera's verification, but also because we see that some developers, they were waiting for methodology updates before going through new verification. So last year, we've had the Red Plus update for the VM 0048, and some developers were waiting for these updates before going through a new verification of credits. Moving forward to demand, we can look at carbon credit retirements. So here this graph shows the quarterly retirements since 2022 that are also divided by project category. We can see that the last quarter of last year was the highest on the year in terms of retirements, with 61 million credits that have been retired. And this is a trend that we can see from seasonal. It's a seasonal market, so usually we see the last quarter being the highest one on retirements if we look historically. If we look the volume of the whole year, 185 million credits have been retired in 2024, which is very close to the amount that was retired in 2023. That has been only a 2% increase when compared to the previous year. And if we look to 2021 and 2022, the amount of credits retired, they have also been around 180 to 185 billion credits. So it hasn't been no significant either increase or decrease in retirement since 2021. But when we look from a qualitative view, like for project categories and also the quality of the credits that have been retired, we can see some more changes, as we'll talk about later. Okay, so the issuances, they have decreased, retirements have been steady, but issuances, they are still much, much higher than the retirements. So it results that the surplus of the market has increased as well. For 2024, we have some data from MSCI that the surplus of the credits in the market has been around 1 billion credits, being a third of it credits from renewable energy projects. Although the surplus continues increasing year over year, we can see that the rates of surplus change, so the rate of this increase has been constantly decreasing since 2022, which is a positive indication. So going back to retirements, we're gonna focus now on NBS projects, first Red Plus and then ARR projects, to see how the retirements have developed over last year. So first, for Red Plus credits, we can see that there was a slight decrease in retirements if we compare 2024 to 2023. So 56 million credits were retired last year, and in 2023, almost 59 credits were retired. So the Red Plus retirements for last year, they have been responsible for almost 20% of the total retirements of the market. So not a very big change as well, if we look at Red Plus in terms of retirements. As I mentioned, in terms of issuances, it has decreased a lot. So the surplus of Red Plus has decreased over the past year. And when we look at ARR retirements, the numbers are very, very different. So there has been an increase of around 40% of retirements when comparing 2023 to 2024, when 22 million credits were retired. So we are seeing the market like this increased interest in removals in general, but especially in NBS removals. and there has been a significant increase when we look at the retirements. But if we compare it to the total retirements of the market, the ARR credits, they are responsible for a 7% share. So it's still not a very big share, but we are seeing this trend increasing year over year. Moving on to prices, there hasn't been many changes if we look at a general average for the market. So by the end of 2024, this general average was around $44.2. There was almost a 10% decrease if we compare with the average price for the beginning of the year. But it has developed in very different ways when we consider different project categories, and also if you look at projects specifically. So there has, for each project category, there has been different changes during the year, but we can see that there are also big spreads. If we look like only at Red Plus, there are credits that are being sold close to this average, that is $2.7. But we can also see in the market projects that are perceived as high quality that can be selling credits at around $12 to $14. So many different prices in the markets and many different directions if we look at different project categories. Some trends that we are seeing, not only looking at retirements, are this increased interest in removals. I already mentioned for NBS removals, but we can also see for technology-based. So the purchases for CDR, carbon dioxide removals, are increased as well, with biochar being the leading kind of project in this project types. Last year, around 423 CDR transactions happened, and that represents around 10,000 credits being sold. We can see that this increase in the number of credits has been very significant. So if we compare 2024 to 2023, the number of credits in CDR transactions has almost doubled. But if we compare it to the whole market, it still represents a very small share. But we are also seeing this increasing. We are seeing offtake agreements. We are seeing investments being done. So probably in the future, we'll continue to see this increase in CDR, but also in ARR transactions and credits retirements. So also speaking about investments in the VCM, this data is from another report from MSCI. We can see that the investments, they have increased since 2021. Since this year, more than $44 billion have been committed or raised to invest in the carbon credit activities. Being last year, until the third quarter, $4.2 billion US dollars committed or raised for investment in this market. So it's a very big, it's a very significant increase. If we compare it to the market size, today, the value of the voluntary carbon market is around $1 to $2 billion. So it's a 7 to 14-fold the amount of the market today. It's a very big number in terms of investments. And just to finish with other trends and qualitative updates that we have seen during 2024, here we highlighted some in the screen. So first, SBTi, it published its Beyond Value Change Mitigation Guidance, creating a pathway for integration with the voluntary carbon market. Although there was this development, it's still not clear, like the SBTi position in relation to the voluntary carbon market and how the credits can be used. But we see that there is an opportunity here. We also saw Guyana issuing the first CORSIA eligible carbon credits to ARC3s. It was a very significant amount of credits that have been issued. And we believe that during the next years, also CORSIA will play a very relevant role in the voluntary carbon market, especially from 2024 onwards, when it begins the mandatory phase of the program. There were also some important developments by the ICVCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. So it announced the first core carbon principle label credits, and it also has evaluated some credits that did not make to the CCP label. So many credits from renewable energy projects didn't get labeled. And on the other hand, credits from other project categories starting getting these labels. We're yet to see how it will play an important role in the voluntary carbon market. We saw Vera announcing new methodologies, especially here we'd like to highlight the new RED Plus and the ARR methodology, trying to assess this integrity and quality concerns that have been discussed in the voluntary carbon markets. And we are also seeing some more and more corporate buyers integrating carbon ratings on their purchasing processes, and also starting to look more closely to quality and integrity, and being more diligent on their buying processes of credits. So here I'd like to hear a little bit from Joe, especially talking about quality and integrity. So we have seen that the market has been pushing for high quality and higher integrity. And a big part of this market is ensuring integrity relates to effectively accessing the quality of individual projects. So not only looking at project types and project categories, but looking specifically at each project and being able to assess quality and integrity. I'd like to know, Joe, how is BeZero working to help buyers doing so with this project assessments? And how are you seeing that these terms of quality and integrity have been evolving in this market?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks for the introduction. And yeah, thanks to Ambipar for inviting BeZero to be part of this. So yeah, just I guess to briefly introduce BeZero Carbon and what we do. So we're an independent carbon ratings agency. We often describe ourselves as, I guess, as a carbon ratings agency as kind of akin to a credit ratings agency in financial markets. We provide a kind of fungible rating that can be applied to any carbon project type on a rating scale from AAA to D, where AAA represents the highest likelihood of the project achieving its carbon claim, through to D, where the project has the lowest likelihood of achieving its carbon claim. We're a team of about 200 people now. About half of the organization are scientists who are very deep specialists in particular project types. So we've got a big team focused on forestry, but also other kind of nature-based project types like blue carbon, through to renewable energy projects, through to cook stoves, through to engineered carbon removals. So really kind of covering the whole of the voluntary carbon market. I guess it's important to distinguish what we do from kind of others in the market. So we're not a standards body. We're not, we're not an accreditor. We're not an MRV provider. What we are is a provider of independent assessment of performance risk of projects and at a project level. So as distinct from an accreditor or a methodology provider like Vera or Gold Standard, we are. We're not assessing their methodologies. We're not assessing as anything higher than a project level. So our assessments are always specific to carbon projects. And what carbon ratings agencies like BeZero emerged in the market to kind of fill that gap of sort of independent project level assessment. And essentially what our mission is really is providing that independent information to the market, to buyers, to investors, and to developers about the risks of carbon projects. So we've existed for about 3 years as a carbon ratings agency. And what we've kind of seen over the time that we've existed is really moving from a situation where there's almost no kind of correlation between price or demand for credits and ratings when we first emerged onto the market and brought our ratings onto the market. through to a situation now where our ratings are quite well correlated with kind of prices observed in the market. And I think we have a slide possibly coming up where that some of that data analysis that we've done is shown. So I might stop there, and I'll come back later and say a bit more about various things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, we indeed have that slide. It's coming forward now. And it relates to our next question that we wanted to ask. We are starting to see this, sorry, are we starting to see this concern with integrity and quality playing like an important role in the market when we look at data like price and retirements? So are you seeing buyers paying premiums for higher quality credits and higher integrity credits? Are the retirements increasing in these terms as well?
So, I guess there's two ways that we look at this question. So the first is kind of through the data. So, we've got two examples here of some analysis that we've run on, the relationship between our price and so our ratings and price or demand in the market. So the graph on the left is our analysis using data from the CBL carbon exchange of the transacted prices for projects with different BeZero ratings. And there's obviously quite a lot of noise in this data here, and we're kind of covering lots of different project types in this graph that do have different prices or different kind of average prices as you were showing earlier. But in general, there's quite a good trend that we're seeing emerge in terms of the relationship between our ratings and price. Comparing with analysis that we've run in previous years, we see this kind of number of the kind of average price premium per rating notch growing. So the identical analysis that we did last year using CBL's data, we got about a 30% premium, and this year from the analysis that we did for prices from 2024, we're getting about 40% premium. So the data does seem to back up that the kind of this appreciation for quality within the market is growing, and buyers seem to be willing to pay a higher price for higher rated credits. That also does somewhat seem to be playing through in terms of retirements of credits as well. So, what the graph on the right really is showing is that in 2022, the retirement of higher rated credits was happening at a lower rate than those credits were available in the market. So about 24% of retirements were triple B rated or higher, and compared to about 32% of the credits available in the market. What we've seen in the last 2 years is that relationship kind of flip round. So now, those higher rated credits are being retired at a higher rate than they are available in the market. And then I suppose the other way we look at it is just, observations of the market and anecdotal evidence. And we do see that increasingly coming through. So, some of the public RFPs that kind of come through from investors and kind of buyers in the market, what we're increasingly seeing is ratings being quoted as a requirement for buyers to look to buy projects, or even kind of limits on the minimum rating that they request when they buy projects. And that's something that we increasingly see as a business.
Perfect. Thank you, Joel. Yeah, we are on our side. We are also seeing this increasing interest, and also these buyers that they use the ratings as one of the criteria for choosing credits and setting like a minimum rating before they move on with commercial discussions with project developers. But it's also very interesting to see data supporting this as well. So here we can also conclude like the surplus for higher quality credits has been decreasing since 2023, because the amount of the retirements has been higher than the percentage of the credits of these ratings that are available in the market. Okay, so moving forward now, I'll ask Gabriel to join us to explain what is the current state of the Brazilian emissions trading system. Please, Gabriel.
Thank you, Luisa. Hello, everyone. Now we are going to talk about the Brazilian emissions trading system, which is official since last year's December. But first, we need to take one step back and set some differences, explain some differences about the regulated markets and the voluntary carbon markets. Luisa? Here we are showing you three main differences of various sets of difference. Here we are showing you three main differences, and the first one is the regulatory system. In a regulated market, it relies on a set of laws established by a state, while in the voluntary carbon market, there is no centralized regulatory system, although it's based on scientifically proven international certifications. The motivation of existence. Countries have emissions reduction targets, and a regulated market establishes an economic incentive to boost companies' decarbonization, while in the voluntary market, there is no, the companies have a sustainability goal defined voluntarily. And the third difference we would like to set here is the main asset of each one of those markets. In a regulated market, the main asset traded there is the emission allowance, which is the right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. While in the voluntary market, we have the carbon credits, which is the effective reduction or removal of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Lu? And here we are showing you the main concept of any regulated carbon market, which is the cap and trade mechanism. It is cap because the law sets a maximum GHG emissions cap for each company or sector, depending on the country we are talking about, and distributes allowances corresponding to that limit. And all companies must have enough allowances corresponding to its emissions. But let's set an example here in which the regulated company A had success decarbonizing their industrial processes, and they have unused allowances. They can sell those unused allowances to other companies that didn't have much success decarbonizing their processes. And this is the trade mechanism. Look. And now we are all set to talk about the Brazilian emissions trading system, in which is called SBC, Sistema Brasileiro de Comércio de Emissões. We are going to talk about 5 main topics of our ETS, and the first one is the regulated companies. The regulation here will focus on emissions limits and not sectors. We are going to talk about the interoperability as well. Lu, please. Thank you. Here in our ETS, we have market interoperability, which is the Brazilian ETS allows companies to offset part of their emissions with CRVEs. We are going to explain what is the CRVE. And this is basically a voluntary credit from the voluntary market turned into the regulated one. We are going to explain this better on the next slides. And since we have interoperability here, the Brazilian ETS law also set some standardization about the voluntary market, and we are going to talk about those as well. We have also new rules on how the Brazilian government will interact with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And last but not least, we are going to talk about the implementation, how long it will take for the Brazilian ETS to be fully operational. We can go to, thank you, Lisa. But first things first. Here in Brazil, after the approval of our ETS, our legislation of the ETS, we have a new public agency here, which is called SBC Managing Body. And we are joking here that this SBC Managing Body will be the great leviathan of all the Brazilian ETS because it has the whole of regulating, implementing, monitoring, and overseeing all the Brazilian emissions trading system. And what about the regulated companies? First of all, let's talk about those that won't be regulated. If you have a company here in Brazil that emits less than 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, you do not take part in the regulated market. You continue doing business as always. But if your company here in Brazil emits more than 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, but less than 25,000 tons, you must submit a monitoring plan and report all your GHG emissions to the SBC managing body. And now the most important part is if your company emits more than 25,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, you must submit a monitoring plan and report all your emissions, but you must conciliate your GHG emissions with assets that are part of the SBC. And which assets are part of the SBC, we are going to see on the next slide. Please listen. Here we have the Brazilian Emission Allowance, the CBE, which is the allowance we talked before. And you can get it, the companies will get some for free from the SBC managing body. And if they don't have success decarbonizing their processes and have to buy more allowances, they can buy from government auctions or they can buy from other companies, which is the trade mechanism we talked before. But here we also have the interoperability we were talking about, and this is the certificate of verified emissions reduction or removal, the CRVE. It represents the effective reduction or removal of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, and you can buy it from a developer, and it will also be traded in the stock exchanges. It's important here to notice that the SBC managing body will define in each year how many CRVs you can use to conciliate your emissions. And this is going to be decided in each year, depending on the SBC managing body decisions. Luisa, please. And here we are showing you, explaining you why the interoperability here in Brazil is so important. I'm showing you two different charts. The one on the left is showing you the global GHG emissions pattern. And you can see that 75% of all GHG emissions around the world are related to energy use. But here in Brazil, our pattern is very different because half of all our emissions are related to land use change, mostly illegal deforestation. And if you're and if you have the regulated market channeling investments into the voluntary market, you can invest in some methodologies which are like forest conservation or forest restoration, which are methodologies that can directly tackling those land use change emissions. And that's why it's so important to have the interoperability here. Next slide, please, Lisa. And the question is, how can I turn a voluntary carbon credit into a CRVE, which can be used in the regulated carbon market here in Brazil? The SBC managing body will be responsible to approve the methodologies and standards that can turn a carbon credit into a CRVE. if you are a developer that has a carbon credit, you can ask the SBC managing body to turn this carbon credit into a CRV. The SBC managing body will check whether this carbon credit is approved or not, and if everything is okay, you can turn it into a CRV. And now I'm going to call Joe. Please, Joe. Joe, interoperability is not new, right? Could you please talk about how that's been happening in other ETS?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's been a bit of a history of countries looking to integrate, voluntary type carbon credits into emissions trading schemes, or compliance carbon markets generally. So I mean, the EU ETS has obviously been a bit of a trailblazer in terms of emissions trading schemes globally, probably being the first major emissions trading scheme, and continues to this day to be in terms of traded volumes, by far the largest emissions trading system in the world. So they had an experience where in the early phases of the EU ETS, they integrated credits from the UN's Clean Development Mechanism. And in general, this was perceived, I think, by policymakers subsequently to be a mistake. I think they saw this as, market observers began to kind of criticize the projects that were being integrated into the scheme, and particularly from an additionality standpoint, some of the carbon credits that were being used to achieve compliance in the EU. And this led to the EU over time kind of removing these credits from the EU ETS. Now, what we've seen really in the last couple of years is countries looking again at doing this. So new countries that are developing emissions trading schemes like Brazil, like India, like China, like Turkey, like Japan, countries that are, newly looking at compliance carbon markets for the first time. And they're looking at the carbon credits because, for the reasons that you've set out, Gabriel, because they are in some ways different to the EU. So Brazil is a clear example here where it clearly makes sense to incentivize investment in nature and nature protection as part of a compliance carbon regime. And what I think we want to see, our observation of integrating project-based carbon into emissions trading schemes is that it can be successful and it can be shown to work. But it's about learning lessons from those past experiences like that of the EU, in terms of governments should be really, really worried about project risk and project quality, and really ensuring that the integrity of projects going into schemes and that are being used for compliance purposes, really that they're doing as much as they can to kind of manage those risks. The market has come a long way. There are tools like ratings that have emerged, insurance, lots of other infrastructure that has grown up around the voluntary carbon market. Methodologies have improved, monitoring processes have improved. We just want to see governments really looking at those tools that are available on the market and using them to make a success of the integration of carbon credits into compliance markets.
Thank you very much, Joe, for your insights. Luisa, I think we can go on. Here we are going to show you some voluntary markets in standardization. As we said before, since in Brazil we have this interoperability, the National Congress here, our parliament, they had some attention about standardizing the voluntary market as well. And the main goal about this was to ensure legal certainty and boost quality of the voluntary carbon credits here in Brazil. Luisa, we can go to the next slide, and we are going to explain some new standardizations. The first one is that only a developer established in Brazil can ask to turn their carbon credits into CRVs, and also the standard must be established in Brazil as well. But Gabriel, do you ask me, I am a foreign company, I have carbon credits that have their methodology approved by the SBC managing body. Can I ask to turn my carbon credits into CRVs here in Brazil? Yes, you can, but at least you have to have an office here in order to be legally accountable. Next slide, please, Lisa. And some new legal framework for voluntary carbon credits and CRVs. We have clear rules about the legal nature of carbon credits and CRVs. This is very important to companies to understand their financial assets. We have clear rules now about taxation. The voluntary carbon credits and CRVs will be allowed to be traded on stock markets. Now companies here in Brazil can claim tax deductions when retiring assets both in the ETS and the voluntary market. We have a public central registry for all CBEs and CRVs in order to ensure transparency, and a public registry for REDD+ projects will also be created. And last but not least, there are clear procedures to avoid double counting between mostly jurisdictional programs and private REDD+ projects. Thank you, Lisa. And here we are going to talk about rules about credit ownership. Now it's established by law that the area where the carbon credit or CRV was generated determines the ownership of the asset. So if this carbon credit was generated in a public land, it belongs to the government. If it was generated in a private land, it belongs to the private landowner, and so it goes on to indigenous communities, traditional communities, and agrarian reform status. And also we have now in law that the ownership can be shared with project developers through contractual agreements. Next one, please. And this is an important part of the voluntary market standardization, which is about the benefit sharing framework. It's important to say that this slide only applies to projects executed within traditional or indigenous lands. And the first obligation, now it's in our law, it is that free, prior, and informed consent is mandatory, and it must be paid by the developer, not the community. Also, the contract must ensure the right of at least 70% of the credits in case of REDD+ projects, and half of the credits in case of ARR projects. They belong to the indigenous land, to the indigenous communities. And the last one, the contract must have a clause providing compensation to the communities in cases of damages resulting from projects. Joel, I'm going to ask you one more question. Do you foresee Article 6 and Brazilian ETS running into similar integrity challenges to the VCM? How rating agencies like BeZero can help tackling those challenges?
Well, thank you very much. So, I mean, I guess coming back to the end of my previous answer, yes, I mean, we are, there is fundamentally no reason to think that carbon credits that are generated within or for a compliance market like the Brazilian ETS, or for the purposes of Article 6, will inherently be higher quality in terms of their carbon impact on the ground. And I guess we see a bit of a misperception potentially in the market or from participants that might be the case. I think that experience that I was talking about of the EU and integration of CDM carbon credits into the EU ETS is a real example of what can go wrong there, when integrity challenges to projects can start to kind of undermine the whole scheme as a whole and really damage kind of prices and damage the integrity of a whole compliance market. I think governments should be really, concerned about that risk. But as I said, there are tools like ratings that can and should be used to manage that. What we propose to governments is that they could look at, ratings as a tool. They could look at, in the, possibly in the softest possible terms, like, requiring, projects to be rated, or requiring buyers to, or buyers that are subject to the compliance scheme to substantiate the integrity of projects that they're using to achieve compliance, using ratings or other means to kind of demonstrate that. So, in general, our suggestion to governments is really look closely at these products that have developed, like ratings and insurance and others, in the voluntary carbon market as a means of making the integration of compliance credits into carbon credits into compliance schemes more effective and more impactful. And the same for Article 6. There is no fundamental reason to believe that the carbon impact of Article 6 projects is going to be higher integrity. We're seeing at the moment, the adoption of CDM methodologies into the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, the Article 6.4 mechanism. And we know that many of those projects have had these types of integrity challenges. So similarly, in that market, we would encourage, as in the VCM, buyers, developers, investors to really look at ratings as that tool to help them navigate the market, identifying where there is quality, and helping developers and investors really differentiate their projects from others.
Thank you, Joel. And please keep in there because we have one more question. But first, this slide shows you new rules about the SBC in fact, the Brazilian interaction with the Article 6 with the Paris Agreement. Our law sets a new rule in which to be internationally transferred in order to be turned into an ITMO, for example, a Brazilian carbon credit must be turned into a CRV. This is mandatory. And the SBC will also decide whether a CRV can be internationally transferred or not. And then I go back to Joe, please. Joe, what are the insights you could share with us about the interactions between other ETS and the Paris Agreement's Article 6?
So I draw two examples. So I think the countries that we're seeing really leading on this approach would be Singapore and Japan. And what we've seen in both those countries is them using the Article 6.2 bilateral mechanism as a means of importing international credits into their compliance markets in order to increase the liquidity and increase the supply of carbon credits. Obviously, Singapore is an extreme example of a very small country with kind of limited natural resources, and therefore, if they want to do this integration of carbon credits and make sure there's investment in nature and do all those good things, they need to import the credits from overseas. So they've really been the leaders from the start of the 6.2 mechanism being established, using that as a means to form bilateral partnerships with other countries, really across the world. Integrating those credits in. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, Singapore launch a really large request for proposals from project developers that may wish to sell credits into the market for their carbon tax. So those countries have I would say been the leaders in looking at this interoperability between Article 6 and compliance markets and exploiting those opportunities.
Thank you so much for your insights, Joe. And last but not least, we have a slide here showing you the implementation of the Brazilian emission trading system. Well, it's a complex legislation, so it's going to take a little bit to be fully operational. There is an article in the law setting these procedures. The legislation was approved in December of the last year, and now we are currently in the first phase, which is going to last from 1 to 2 years, which is going to be directed to SBC regulation. So all norms, all procedures are being discussed and established right now and will take from 1 to 2 years, we hope 1 year. And after that, we have the second phase, which is going to last 1 year, and it's intended for regulated entities to understand the instruments for reporting emissions. As we said, if your company emits more than 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide here in Brazil, you are obliged to report your emissions to the SBC managing body each year. And this is going to be the time in which the companies can be used to that procedure. After that, we will have the third phase, which is going to last 2 years. It's confirmed to last 2 years, and it's going to be directed to the first reports of emissions, and there will be no legal sanctions. It's like a test for everyone. And the fourth phase, in which will be the first annual allocation plan with no onerous distribution of allowances. So we are calculating here that the SBC will be fully operational around 2030. So it's going to take a little bit, but while this is happening, we are going to, on one side, discuss the regulation with our local government and set the best experiences around the world, explain them. And on the other side, we are going to explain to our clients how the ETS is going to work. And we are at your disposal to solve any doubt you have, any question you have about the Brazilian emission trading system. And this is all for me now. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, please send us in the question and answers button, because we are going to answer to them. Luisa?
Thank you, Gabriel, for your presentation. Thank you, Joe, for the insights. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but I see we have 2 questions here, so we'll get to them. And if you have any other further questions, please write us, and we can write you back by email. So both, I think you are the ideal person to answer them, Gabriel. The first one is, once you have converted the carbon credit into a CRV, can you only sell it through the SBC, or can you go shopping in both SBC and the voluntary markets?
Well, if I understand this question, you can also sell it or buy it in the stock market. Now we are going to have this possibility here, in which the Brazilian stock market will also trade both CRVs and voluntary carbon credits. So it's going to be an asset.
Perfect. And can a company that is going to, this is my perception, a company that is going to voluntarily offset its emissions, it can be either through a CRV or also through a voluntary carbon credit that has not gone through this conversion, right, Gabriel?
Right. But
Perfect.
as the CRV the CRV will have a surplus price, because it's intended to be traded in the regulatory market. Regulated, sorry.
So we expect a premium price for them. The other question is, you mentioned that companies that own Brazilian carbon credits but are not project developers may ask SBC managing body for conversion to CRVs, but need to have a legal office in Brazil. Is that correct?
This is not so clear about the legislation. I think we'll have a better answer when the regulation comes, but we can see from the text of the legislation that yes, you can ask your carbon credit to be turned into a CRVE if you are a carbon credit holder. It doesn't matter if you are a developer or not, but yes, you have to have an office here in Brazil to be legally accountable for this CRV you are trying to these carbon credits you are trying to turn into a CRV. But it will be clear in the regulation.
Perfect. We already got an answer for that. Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel, for your answers. And thank you, everyone, for keeping up with us this few minutes past the time. Thank you, Joe, for being here with us as well. Now we're getting to the end of our webinar. We are always available if you want to chat, if you have any other doubts, if you have any suggestions for the next editions. So that's it for now. Thank you, guys. Have a nice week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.